This is the Christian Circle podcast, and you're listening to Pamela Fernandez, where we have conversations about Christian living. Here's the show. Welcome to a new episode of the Christian Circle podcast. Today we have a new guest who's going to talk to us about being single, seen, and still called, and rethinking love in the church. So Lauren, tell us a little bit about yourself and your ministry.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Lauren Windle, and I am an author and a presenter and a public speaker. And one of the things that I speak about and write about often is the experience of single people in the church and how we can date well, how we can, treat others really well within that season, and sort of encouraging churches as well, and hopefully equipping them to feed the sort of single people in their congregations as best possible.
So I did go through a number of your interviews and even your book, and you talk about a lot of the unintentional things that singleness has turned into. And one of them is like this waiting room theology. So many Christians today still see singleness as like a temporary season before marriage. And in Notes on Love, one of your books, you challenge all these cultural narratives. Do you think in some way that the church has unintentionally turned singleness into a waiting room, and how do we reclaim it as vocation in itself?
We don't approach the problems around it, like this sort of sense of feeling isolated or lonely or not celebrated at times, and think, right, how do we solve those problems as individual problems? We think that we can solve those problems just by getting the person married. And we'll often say things like, oh, when's it your turn? Or, are you being too picky? Or are you out there? Are you on dating apps? Are you trying to meet people? And you very much get the impression that as a single person, you should be working towards a relationship and taking active steps to build one. And I don't think that creates a healthy mindset in those single people at all. As you say, that kind of waiting room. I know someone who has got an apartment and he is a single man and he's bought like no furniture for it. He's got like minimal, like a chair here, a table there and a bed, because he's like, when I get married, my wife will want to pick those things, the cushions and yeah, maybe, but also he's lived in that apartment for 2 years now, and it still looks like a sort of student hostel. And really, yes, it's great to want a relationship. And yes, it's great to have a life that flexes and compromises enough to accommodate another person. But you also need to live with and embrace and enjoy the season that you're in at that time, for however long it lasts, whether that's for the rest of your life or just for the next week.
Mm-hmm. So your work actually pushes back against this idea that romantic love is the ultimate form of fulfillment. That's how we think. How, as a Christian, can we recover from this idea and move to a more biblical version of love, where you have friendship, where you have community sacrificial love, where the love is outward looking, unlike marriages, which are all inward looking at this point, especially when this culture idolizes marriage, like this is the ultimate thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even when, outside of sort of Christian circumstances, if you look at all of these dating shows and game shows and reality shows, all of them, you win by coupling up, by being in a relationship, by committing more to that relationship. That is the ultimate prize, is the husband or wife or partner or boyfriend or girlfriend that you walk away with. And actually, I do think that is sending the wrong message about the love that we should be striving for. And again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with romantic love and marriage. And I believe it is an absolute gift from God and should be encouraged and celebrated. But there's so much more to love than that. And ultimately, if you're a sort of single person and you're looking for the most consistent, most fulfilling, most deep, most incredible love that you can possibly find, that is not going to be in your romantic partner. That's going to be in Jesus. And it's so easy to think that a lot of your problems will be solved when you get into that relationship, when really, if you work on deepening your relationship with your Father, with God, with Jesus, then actually you will have all of the love that you need, and any romantic relationship is just a bonus. And also, when we have that focus, as you say, it means that we're discarding things like friendship and community, even love for ourselves, because we're just focused on attaining this one type of love. And really, being a good friend, being able to love people in friendship is something that you will need to exercise far more throughout your entire life, and will potentially bring you far more joy and fulfillment and connection than any romantic relationship.
Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you about, the feelings within the church. Like, I've experienced this myself. Many single Christians say they feel more alone in the church rather than outside it, especially when you have very family-centered parishes. And there are a lot of activities that are geared towards, children. They're geared towards teenagers. They're geared towards couples, elderly. But everybody forgets about these people in between. And what do you think churches are getting wrong about including single people meaningfully?
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, lots of churches that I know have got a young people's ministry for sort of youth, and that could even go up to sort of young adults who are like 25 maybe. And then the next time that there's an opportunity to benefit from a church ministry is basically like a marriage prep course.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no, very few churches have something for people in their 30s, 40s, 50s that does not revolve around their relationship status, marriage prep, or there's family ministry, parenting courses, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
When actually that means that once you sort of age out of the young adults group, if you haven't changed your relationship status, you can kind of just fall through that crack, and you can end up just serving and not feeling like you're being served at all. And I think that that's a real shame. And I think that it does leave people feeling let down by the church. Also often the church is based on the school calendar, so churches can get kind of empty in August, and the preaching will, the preaching will be sort of, guest preachers from the congregation, and it won't be the full worship team. It'll be one person, on an acoustic guitar or something like that instead. And it just feels like less effort is put in those times, because the families are away and because the kids will be on summer holidays and things like that. When actually, lots of single people don't go away in August because it's so much more expensive, and it's easier for them to go away during term time. So it's still there, still showing up, still available. But actually what's being offered to them isn't as full a service as it would be if all of the families were around. And again, that can feel kind of devaluing. You can sort of be sitting there thinking, gosh, I can't wait for in a few years' time, hopefully, when I'll be off with my partner and my children at this time as well, and actually that just doesn't breed a sort of healthy congregation. I think it is so important to celebrate those big milestones, the engagements and the marriages and the anniversaries and the children and the pregnancies and all of those, and the births. We should celebrate them. They're such wonderful milestones. But for people who are committed to staying single, or who hope for a relationship but don't have one at the moment, we need to find other ways to make them feel incredibly celebrated as well. And actually we can throw just as big a party for someone getting engaged as we can for someone who gets a promotion or a new job, or pays off their mortgage, or gets a dog, or there are life milestones that don't involve relationship status. And I think it's important for everyone to feel really seen for their achievements.
Mm-hmm. Now, modern dating often mirrors, all the secular dating apps, and it leads to all of this burnout and confusion. From your perspective, how can Christians actually date in a way that's rooted in discipleship rather than, this performance or this anxiety that comes with all of the apps?
Yeah, it's really tough, isn't it? Because in many ways, these dating apps don't feel very Christian or very, like the sort of kingdom of God at all.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when you're a person who's committed to your faith, if you want to date somebody who is also committed to their faith, then the places that you can meet partners are reduced. You can't, in the sort of secular world, people meet people in bars and in nightclubs, in gyms, and in various different places. The chances of you going to one of those places, spotting somebody who is like around the right age and going over and chatting to them, chances of them being a committed Christian are pretty slim. And I'd say it's just not a good use of your time if you're hoping to meet someone in that way. So actually, and then there's a sort of difficulty sometimes of meeting someone in your actual church, because if that gets complicated, or if you break up and you feel very disappointed, it means that whilst you're healing from that pain and disappointment, you may have to see them every Sunday. And that's, daunting for a lot of people. So it can feel like, okay, well, where am I actually going to meet someone? And that's why meeting people online, on dating apps and on similar places, if you go to a specific Christian place, it means that you will be meeting people who probably share your faith. And obviously you have to do some due diligence and have conversations about what their faith means to them, and make sure that you feel you are sufficiently aligned to sort of pursue dating. But that's a really helpful tool. So I think they're great for Christians to find other Christians, but they, people can kind of treat dating apps like a game to be completed, like swiping yes, no, judging people. And it can all feel kind of gross. And I know a few married couples who have openly said that if they'd seen the other person on a dating app, they would have swiped no. But actually, once they met, and hung out in real life, and they were in real, they met through sort of friends or through church, and actually they really realized they liked each other. So you can definitely miss some great people on dating apps by being too selective, when really, if you'd met in person, you would have really liked and felt an attraction towards that person. So I think actually what we need to do is, the more that you're on a dating app, the more you get into a rejection mindset. So if you sit on it for an hour and you sort of swipe left, right, and center, and you're quite quick as you go through, you're far less likely to be of a mind to accept people and to want to connect with people. So I interviewed a psychologist from the Netherlands who was phenomenal. And she told me that the best way to do a dating app is to open up the app, look at that profile, and spend a good sort of 2 or 3 minutes looking at it, which isn't a huge amount of time in the scheme of life, but given the amount of time people usually spend looking at a profile, that's really long. Look at each picture, look at what they've written, acknowledge that this is a human person who has written this profile with the same hopes, the same disappointments, the same dreams often as you. Acknowledge their humanity, have a think about it, maybe even have a pray about it, and decide if you'd like to know more. And if you would, swipe to sort of connect with them. And if you wouldn't, then don't. But then you put your phone away, and that's you. You have done a dating app for the day. You don't need to do that with 20 people in a row. Actually just giving that person the dignity. I think that's, of a real consideration, really looking at what they've offered you on their profile, and then putting your phone away. That's how we do a good job of dating apps.
I think that's very good advice. That's really nice.
Thank you. Yeah, I think so. I think that it's so easy to just forget and just see these as like faces without human souls and stories and hopes behind them. And that's just never going to be a good thing.
Yeah. And I think it's because you hear so many horror stories, and this is just from friends. Like, people who've gone through really bad experiences, and your first assumption is that everybody here is out for something ulterior, and then you're like, okay, maybe there's 1 or 2 good people there.
Yeah, totally. I agree. And I think it's good to give yourself the space to find those good people.
Even though people are dating and all of these things, how should single people, especially Christians, hold this tension between this deep desire that they have for marriage and the possibility that it may not happen? What does faithful disappointment look like? I mean, I read a story just a couple of days ago where this 60-year-old woman said, I never found somebody to, spend the rest of my life with until now. And she does end up getting married at the age of 60. And this is in India. This is really a very conservative place. And so how do you hold this tension in between and then say, okay, I'm disappointed, but this is where I'm staying faithful?
Yeah, I think it's really tough. And I see people online on social media and some sort of dating experts and things, and they'll say things like, oh, sign up to my course or buy my book or do this, and you'll have your husband in 6 weeks or in 6 months or something. And like, as a person who writes about dating and Christian dating, I would love to be able to promise you that, but I think it's irresponsible, and I think it's wrong, because actually, I think it's playing on those really deep desires, on that disappointment. And there's a part of everyone who's been single for a long time that thinks like, yeah, go on then, I'll give you my, $200 or whatever it is, if that really means that I'm going to get my husband or my wife. And really, that is just not how the world works. And that sort of irresponsible messaging is, I think, really unfair. And actually, the reality is that there will be people who have a deep desire for a partner, and through circumstance or through other things, don't end up getting married. And we must acknowledge that is deeply, deeply disappointing. And for some people, they would consider that to be the greatest disappointment of their lives, And I really hope and pray for the people who are single, who really have that hope and desire for a relationship, that they find it, and they find a really fulfilling, God-centered marriage that they've been praying for. But as you say, that may not be right now, or it may not be at all. And I think the healthiest place that we can get to as individuals is a place where we can acknowledge that God's plan will never be worse for us than the one that we've got. And actually, if we get to the end of our lives and we've followed and we've been faithful and we've prayed and we've listened and we've gone where he has taken us, we will never look back and regret that decision. We'll never think, I wish I'd taken matters into my own hands and married someone who wasn't quite right for me, or anything like that, And sometimes, for a lot of people, if the aim was just marriage, any marriage, they could be married,
Yeah.
But that is not the aim. Being single is far better than being in an unhealthy, abusive marriage, being in a marriage that takes you away from your faith, being in there are plenty of married people who are desperately lonely within their marriages. And that is not what we want. And actually, faced with those two options, singleness is preferable every single time, So it's a trust. It is a call to a deeper faith in God, that even if his best for you doesn't look like what you hoped, you will not regret following it.
That's good advice. So beyond relationship status, if there's somebody who's listening and feels like their identity is, tied to whether they're chosen romantically, especially when you go through so much of rejection, you go through so much of disappointment, what spiritual or practical shifts would you suggest to help them root their identity more deeply in Christ? Something that's more practical, something that you yourself have probably implemented or seen your friends implement, so that they don't feel as rejected, because in the end, we're ultimately so loved by Christ. But these relationships, or the lack thereof, kind of affects people's mentality.
Yeah, it's really easy to feel like you're not wanted and you're not chosen, particularly if you see people around you getting into relationships, and then you compare yourself and you think, oh, maybe they are more attractive or better looking or more desirable or funnier or more intelligent, or they've prayed more, or God loves them more because he's given them, the thing that they want. And you can really start to build up a picture, as you say, of yourself as unlovable. And then you're kind of waiting for somebody to come and choose you and say like, no, you're great, when really you don't need an individual to find you physically attractive to want to go on a date with you in order to know that you have the most immense value. And I think that for a lot of Christians, they know that in theory. They understand, okay, I'm really loved and I don't need validation from people. And they can say all of the words I just said, but do they really believe it? And I think that big challenge is to get that from, this is a bit of a cliche, but from sort of head knowledge to heart knowledge. Like practically, we all know that we don't need the affirmation of another person. But in life, are we actually living from that place? Are we actually living from a place where we are ultimately beloved? I think more time with God in prayer and things like that is always really important to root us in the truth of his word, in the truth of our identity in him. And also, these are two such basic suggestions, but my goodness, they work. And that's why they come up so often. But the Bible is like a love story, where God is just so in love with the people, with us who he's created, and just desperately disappointed every time we choose something that isn't him, which is all the time. And it's just like time after time after time of him reaching out and us as people rejecting him, and him going to such extreme lengths to get our attention and to get us to realize how much he cares about us, how much he's looking out for us, how much he's planned for us, how many good things he wants us to have, with us just consistently going like, no, I've got a better plan. I've got a better plan. And the more that you see that, and the more you identify those huge lengths and at great cost and pain to God that he goes to, the sacrifice of his son to die for us, that is just absolutely phenomenal sacrifice, all because of the extreme way that he loves us. And he would do it over and over again. And he would do it even if it was just that one person who's listening to this now thinking, but I really do need a man or a woman to be like, no, you're attractive. And I want to be with you in order to really feel valued. Well, even if that person was the only person on earth, he would have gone to all of those lengths again for a connection and a relationship with them. So like the creator of the whole universe is bending over backwards to be in relationship with us, despite the fact that we keep letting him down. So I don't know why, so really we don't need a flawed, broken person to tell us that we are worthy of that level of pursuit, because God shows us over and over again, and God is literally God, but you can hear that, and I can say that, and you can say that, and people in church can say that to you. You can hear it over and over again, and it's a case of really praying on it, really meditating on it, really allowing that to become the cornerstone of your life. And then the way that other people choose or don't choose you, or the way that you perceive that you're being chosen or not chosen, will not be able to shake you, because you will see time and time again how you've been chosen by the Most High God. And that is just incredibly affirming and exciting.
So if you have any last bits of advice, anything, that is hard hitting for somebody who is listening, and one takeaway message that you think they should all hear, what would it be?
I'd love people to take away the message of hope, because people can feel so despairing, so forgotten, so alone, when really and it's okay to grieve. It's okay to grieve relationships that you thought would work, or timelines that you thought you had to stick to, or, different milestones that you wanted to hit. It's okay to grieve those, but we don't grieve without hope, and we can hope in God, and we can believe that what he's got lined up for us is better than anything we could have imagined, even if it looks different. So believing in that hope, living in the light of that hope, walking with God, knowing and hoping in what he's got for us, I think is the way that we healthily handle these challenges.
Well, that was great. That's great advice. So where can people find you online, Lauren?
Yeah. So, well, I post on Instagram quite regularly, and I'm at Lauren Windle, LAURENWINDLE_. But I've also got loads of information about my books and podcasts that I feature on, and my work and things, and articles I've written on my website, which is laurenwindle.com as well.
Great. So thank you so much for joining us today, Lauren, and thank you for sharing all your advice. I wish you all the very best, and even to your ministry as well.
Fab, thank you so much. It's been lovely to join you.